technical side, we're all ready to go? Awesome. All right. This special meeting of the Board of Education for August 20th, 2024 is called to order. All items being considered this evening are posted on the PPS website under the Board and Meetings tab. This meeting is being streamed live on PPS TV Services website and on Channel 28 and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the district website for replay times. Good evening. Welcome. Tonight we have a very short special meeting, hopefully short. To vote on a consent agenda, consider 2 contracts that have been pulled for separate votes at the request of Director Brim-Edwards, and to vote on a resolution that affirms our values related to cell phones in schools in creating rich learning environments for our students. Following this meeting, we will move to our annual ethics and public meetings training. Great. Before we begin, is there any discussion on the consent agenda?
I have a question. We had got notice that there might be a convention center contract in this consent agenda, but I did not see that added.
Old, I believe.
It's separate.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see it.
It's down
Old
below.
What's the number on it?
It must be the 695.
It was HCS amendment.
Yes, 695.
Oh, no. Okay,
Yeah.
the contract is different. What? Sorry. Attachment. Okay, got it. Thank
You
you.
know what this is?
I didn't recognize that. That's all.
Anybody else have any comments, questions?
Second motion.
Yes, please.
Someone's
Seconded.
Great. We have Director Brim-Edwards moves and Director Green seconds. We'll now vote on the consent agenda, which is resolution 6951 through 6953. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Yes. Opposed, say no. All right. Consent agenda resolution 6951 through 6953. Approved, vote of 6-0. Let's move on to, I think, all this is right here. I should have just read that. Sorry. New to this. We're now at the request, we had a request earlier from both Director Scott and Director Brim-Edwards to vote separately on 2 expenditure contracts. These are the proposed contracts with Metropolitan Exposition and McKenzie. We'll first start with a contract for Metropolitan Exposition, which is resolution 6953.
4.
4. I can't read either, so thank you. Yeah, thank you.
I didn't make it. I was asking.
No, we didn't.
If you wanted to put it on.
Do I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 6954, expenditure contracts that exceeds $150,000 for delegation of authority?
So moved.
Second.
Motion.
Thank you. We have Director Green moves and Director DePass seconds. Is there any board discussion?
Yeah, so just note I'll be abstaining on this, just it's a contract with Metro, so.
Yeah, I had this pulled, as I'm going to do periodically throughout the year, just of contracts that, as I think about the budget cuts we had to make last year and the ones we're making this year, it's a rental space for PD, and so my hope and expectation is that when we can use our school buildings and utilize our resources and the facilities for school district-related activities, that we can save on outside expenditures. I realize this is for tomorrow, so I'm not just abstain. I'm not going to vote against it. And I realize it's just the timing is bad, and that's how it happened to come to it. I hope this next year, when we think about our budget, that we are trying as much as possible to have our meetings in our own spaces, now that we have some great high school spaces. So
Yeah, I'd like to just say one thing about that, Julia. I just want to say I really appreciated you, checking it out, and I also appreciated knowing why we did that. When you brought it up, then the answer was very clear, and it's just nice to know why. So appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. I also want to second what Director Sullivan said. I am supportive of this contract because I understand very clearly that the needs are pretty great and it's very, the timeliness of it. But I do also really appreciate your sentiment about making sure that we, especially in tight budget years, try to find the way to save. So it would be nice if in the future we can move to something that we own or that BPS owns.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to comment just for a minute or so that, our largest investment as a school system is in personnel. Therefore, our investment in their training and in their education and growth, should be professional learning. And so, of course, when we think of this facility in this space, once we get upwards of 50 to 60 individuals, we have to look at alternative spaces. And we do have some sites where we're able to use some of those spaces, but teacher professional learning, as well as a host of other departments, do use alternative locations to be able to host professional learning for all the varying teams that are in upwards of 100, 200, 300. Now, this event happens to, be set for potentially 2,000 educators. But I do want to say that there are plans moving forward to use the Marshall site for however many years we can use them before we're back impacted. But I join in thinking in the future where we can have a dedicated professional learning site where we no longer have to use conference rooms, convention centers, and other facilities across the city of Portland when we have numbers that exceed our space. But I appreciate you all's consideration and feedback, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I do want to highlight that when we're talking about potentially 2,000 really adult-sized human beings,
Yes.
which is very hard to normal buildings. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, if there's no more, the board will now vote on Resolution 6953, expenditure contracts that exceed $150,000 for delegation of authority. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please indicate by saying no. And are there any abstentions? Thank you.
And Chair, I just want to note it's Resolution 6954.
Did I say 6953 again?
Yeah. That's
Yes.
Thank you.
6953, Resolution 6953.
4.
4. I am really stuck on the
He's
3.
making sure we stay on our toes. Thank you, sir. We appreciate you.
Thank you for putting that in a positive light. So that we have
For
Resolution 6954 is approved by a vote of 4-0 with 2 abstaining. Student Representative Kasabian is not here today. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to expenditure contract for McKenzie, which is Resolution 6955. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6955?
motion.
Second.
Thank you. We have Director Green moves and Director Brim Edwards seconds. Is there any board discussion?
The reason I asked to have this pulled is this is a contract that sets the minimum, help establish the minimum criteria for the Profit Education Center. And we adopted a resolution as a board. Let's see, the date. Sometime recently. Resolution 6861 sets some timelines. And when I ask about this minimum criteria, it sounds that it will be March probably before we have the minimum criteria. So it doesn't seem like this contract is going to fit with the current timelines we have in our resolution. So the question is, should we be amending the timelines, or is the, not being a little bit at Dan, I'm not sure who to answer, but this doesn't seem like it's going to fit May 7th, just to put on the minimum criteria, and then this has a 12-month timeline, so it seems like we're going to be out of compliance. Do we need,
Can you say, I'm sorry, what? I
do we need
can't.
to update the resolution?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so just for a little context, so the original resolution I think was February, March-ish. And so they had the 60-day timeline to establish minimum criteria. So we went through an effort, a quick effort to look at what that minimum criteria would be. PPS and ABT both agreed it would behoove us to take a little more time, bring in some third-party expertise, and look at how organizations operate before we finalize that minimum criteria. So that's the contract for you. That, of course, does not then work with that timeline of 60 days. So we're all in agreement that to move that timeline, we had discussion with board leadership before that decision was made. So I think your question is, I'm just repeating it, I guess, is do we need to amend that resolution to give another timeline, or can we just proceed with understanding where we are? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if somebody else knows the answer.
I would just say it's a huge asset for the district, and so if we're changing the timeline, we should be transparent about it and adjust the resolution.
Or perhaps there's a revocation of that resolution and in public, the public updates of the timeline. I think putting the timeline in resolution as the complexity of this project goes forward makes it a moving target, and that is not to shy away from the sensitivity of the timeliness of this, and that we need to keep moving with all deliberate speed. But so far, we've not been. Our ability to predict timelines has been challenging with the complexity of the project.
So that would be, I think, be a viable solution as well. It just seems like we have a resolution that we are already off, and it seems like in some public way that we should transparently talk about our new timeline. If that's, or the range of the new timeline.
Yeah, happy to do that. And I just wasn't sure if I followed, like, do we think that needs to be an updated resolution, or is that something that can forward as a written update, or the sample schedule? Happy to do whatever works best for everyone.
Okay, no other questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide support. I don't know if I understand yet. I don't think I understand the ask. Maybe if you don't mind just restating that so I can be clear.
So I believe in the resolution it says we were supposed to have the minimum criteria set by May 7th.
Yeah, last May, so 3 months ago.
And that the process will be completed in 12 months.
Okay.
And that it's a very large potential transaction. And I've had people ask me, like, what's happening with it? And, like, what's the minimum criteria? Including, our employees who work in this building have a lot of interest in it. And so it seems like we have a resolution that's not currently aligned with.
Oh,
And that's
so are
not a
you
bad
saying-
thing, it's just
yeah.
making it
I think we can work to accomplish that. I think I understand.
I think there's a number of different ways, but
Yeah.
it's just like we have a resolution that's not accurate anymore.
Understood. I think we can bring something forward in the next meeting. We'll talk about the best way to do that reflects the complexity of the project.
Great. So that will be next week.
It will be soon. I don't know. It will be soon. We will work on it post haste.
Yes.
And then just, my other question, just for the record, is that this is a contract. This is going to be bundled into the cost that ABT is covering.
Correct. So we're still working on finalizing the operating agreement that will come to the board. There's lots of nuance in that larger operating agreement, but reimbursement is not one of the sticking points. So we're already setting up a procedure for reimbursement. So PPS will front the funds, and then we'll submit for reimbursement. ABT will review and reimburse.
And the deliverable comes to PPS
Thank you. Any other board members have questions or comments? All right. Spresh, I forgot to ask this of the last one too, but is there any public comment? Thank you.
Can I please ask who motions?
I did.
Thank you.
Then
I
who
did.
seconded, because I heard just.
Sure.
I wasn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
I probably should be writing this down.
I motioned. Julia seconded, and we started talking.
And the rest is history.
I have no problem reading this number, 6955. All right, we will now move to vote on Resolution 6955, expenditure contracts that exceed $150,000 for delegation of authority. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. We have Resolution 6955 is approved by a vote of 6-0. Great. We are now moving on to Resolution supporting mental health and learning, 6956. So the next item on the agenda is a resolution. I just want to be very clear, this is not the policy. This is only a resolution supporting student mental health and learning. As I stated last meeting, this resolution is meant to just be a statement of values. It's not a directive. It is to be supportive of schools. And one of the big goals, I think I reiterated last time, was that there's a lot of teachers that have been asking for help. I think some polls showed up to 90% of teachers saying that this is a big problem. So this resolution, the purpose of this resolution is two things. One is to say, hey, we heard you and we're working on something. But also number two, there's also some schools that are kind of on the fence about whether they want to implement or push forward towards support. This is also to help hopefully convince some of them to kind of move forward and go ahead and support their teachers in terms of dealing with cell phones in schools. The draft before us includes feedback and suggested edits from board members that were provided at the last meeting. And again, I just want to reiterate, there's a separate policy that's being worked on in policy committee currently. This is not that. This is a separate issue. And really look forward to hearing those voices talk about cell phones and policy committees if you have. So moving on, do I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6956?
So moved. A second?
Y'all both can't move and second.
Yeah. You want to arm wrestle for this?
Take your pick.
That's funny.
Okay.
And agnostic.
I'll
We did vote, so you can pick whatever
Director
you
Brim Edwards moves. I have Director DePass seconds. All right. Is there any board discussion?
I'm really happy that this is kind of on the table, and from parents and teachers too, that they're really looking forward to what we come up with. I'm really happy that the students are being engaged. I think it'll be great work for the students to do coming back to school. They have a lot to say about this. I know some of our board members do too. They have kids in school. Anyway, I'm just really happy. I've followed up with some of the research, the BRAINS research, and I would just hope that we could get it done sooner, or the policy that is sooner than later. I think we're aiming for our second semester.
Yeah.
So the policy committee can meet and get feedback, but we won't have the students' feedback until I think October 15th. And then that will have to be incorporated in at a policy committee meeting. We'll have a full board meeting if that's what the desire is, to talk about the policy, and then hopefully we'll get through the process.
21-day period. Okay.
Well, I just would also like to acknowledge that should a policy go into effect, there would probably need to be some processing and systems and structures at schools to be able to transition to. Sometimes those things can look like a soft role and then, you know, a more firmer role in the fall. But just, I just want to manage expectations around maybe some of the lived realities in schools and some of the things that may come up from policy to say that, you know, once it's adopted, it like goes into effect immediately.
Yeah, I'd like to say too, I was at an OSBA meeting last weekend, and that was really a hot topic everywhere. So we're going to have a lot of people trying to do things, and hopefully we can be a leader and help figure out how to do it.
I appreciate the resolution. I'm going to vote for it. I think it's a good statement of values as a district is where we're going to go in that direction. I think the only thing I just want to sort of put out there is just a reminder to the community that we already allow our schools and our classrooms and our teachers to ban cell phones. And I think sometimes as part of this conversation where they're looking to a district, and this is true in Portland Public Schools, I see it across the country in this conversation, they're looking to a board to pass something. We're forgetting some of those tools that are already there. And I know this is part of the policy conversation you're already having, because I respect what you said, you know, Chair Wong, about, you know, teachers, it can be challenging, right, to enforce. It will continue to be challenging to enforce. And I think sometimes when we do these policy processes, we pretend or think that, oh boy, if the district as a whole just passes something, all of a sudden it'll be easier. And actually, Superintendent, to your point, it's going to take a lot to implement, short of, you know, mandatory, you know, pouches for every phone in the school district, which you know, may be cost prohibitive. We're still going to have that enforcement at the classroom level. We're still going to have that classroom management. And so I've raised all that to say that to the extent, and the new research is pretty clear, this can be very damaging. I think, you know, moving in this direction can improve student achievement. We don't need to wait for us, the 7 of us, to adopt a policy. Schools can do this, teachers can do this, parents can do this right now. And I would encourage all those things to be happening, because our policy will be an important statement and it'll be important, you know, baseline, but it's still going to be the schools that are going to have to successfully implement that. And they have that authority to move forward right now.
Georgia Scott just caught you tried to capture that in F here, which, like, recognizing that, like, this wasn't all of a sudden a new thing, that individual schools already do that. So it's a recognition, because people are like, well, you already have something? It's like most schools, to your point, have something. So try and differentiate. This isn't the, I think this is the cure-all.
So this is not the silver bullet? This is awkward.
Okay. Yeah, I thank you for both your points. I think, especially, I also want to also reiterate that, you know, a policy alone is not going to fix this. All the problems, right? I think it's important to also understand that, that, like you said, I really appreciate you putting. It's going to be a big effort, and it's going to take a lot of ramping up whatever is necessary to provide the support that teachers need in order to make this successful. But also, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to start moving in the right direction, right? And I think that's the point of this resolution, is to show commitment that we want to move in the right direction without being a directive. Not saying this is what has to happen, but saying our attention is focused on problem solving and making this, try to make something that at least makes things a little bit better.
Yeah, I think part of it, and, you know, to number F also, is that we want to make it easier for teachers to enforce, because it's not enforced equally in schools even, and so it's hard it doesn't send a clear message to our students if the building doesn't have a umbrella policy that, you know, offers the teachers a way to enforce the ban. I think that, you know, it's a value, it states our values, and it, I think, might make it easier for teachers to say we have a blanket policy and this is the expectation.
I echo, I appreciate the statement of value, and I, as conversations are continuing to pick up across the United States, I encourage all of us to lean in. I know not all of us are represented on policy committee, but one of the things that I urge you all to think through as board members is, a ban, is it a big P or a little p? A big B in ban or a little b? Because then that brings some other follow-up. Some of the things that some of the superintendents across the states have been discussing is that if it is a ban and teachers decide not to enforce the ban, is there discipline on the teachers? Or if students don't comply with whatever it is they're supposed to do for the ban, is it discipline for them? And then what does that conversation look like, right? So there's some implications, and I think I would hope and encourage everyone to collect information, talk to counterparts who are on boards, and be in those conversations. Because when I think of North Clackamas and their district-wide, I think, removal of cell phones, as they stated clearly, it's not a new policy, it's the existing policy, but just more of agreement in enforcing that policy around. And so I know as I've heard different conversations, I think it would be good for us to be clear on if we're talking like an actual ban, like no devices, nobody ever at all, or is it about enforcing a policy and creating some momentum to do that? So just wanted to offer those words out of what the national narrative is on cell phones, to ban or to policy.
Thank you. That was very good. That was very good. I do want to also just kind of reiterate that I think a lot of the discussions we're having right now need to go to policy committee to talk about the actual policy. And I do want to reiterate it's important that in a policy, again, I'm not talking about the resolution now, I'm violating my own redirection. It's important that we don't, as a board, as a governing body, direct how to do something, right? But I think it is important for us to direct our values, but also to show that there is a need for change, right? So something has to change. And again, I'm redirecting back to this resolution. This resolution is not a policy. It is just a statement of value saying that we hear you. We are going to seek potential answers and to support our teachers. But yeah, everything you said was absolutely very important. I hope you say that in policy committee. Because it needs repeating. All right. Is there any more discussion before we move to vote on Resolution 6956? Is there any, Ms. Brashaw, is there any public comment?
No.
Thank you. All right, the board will now vote on Resolution 6956, resolution supporting student mental health and learning. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? All right, that means Resolution 6956 is approved by a vote of yes. I don't know if I said yes. By a vote of 6-0. And that is the end of our business day, right? All right. All right, this meeting is adjourned. The next regular meeting of the board will take place September 10th. We'll now move on to our annual training on ethics and public meetings. Thank you.
I think it was 625. Really? Did they really put 625?
Yeah, we only have a couple of minutes.
Now,
Oh, if I had something, you probably would have ended it.
Yeah, we'll blame you for that.
We will just, yeah, it's us that should be quiet.
Yes. The more yeah, let me keep it off here.
So Mike is setting up.
Okay.
It's every year my pleasure to introduce Mike Porter, reintroduce Mike Porter to you, who's a longtime partner of PPS and legal advisor, and all around just a good guy. He also is gives advice throughout the year to school districts across the state in ethics and public meetings laws. One of the things you will hear in this presentation, and you may have received from the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, is there is a new requirement that you take the OGEC ethics training sometime in your tenure, in your term, but it is not yet ready. And so I don't want you to feel like we're setting you up for redundant training. That one will focus a lot on executive sessions, and Mike has left that part pretty light to try to make it valuable, but it's also the PPS policy requires annual ethics training for the board and its senior members. There are many senior members who are not here, but they are going to watch it, the recorded version of this. Mike knows we're trying to target a 7 p.m. start for the next session, but we certainly don't want to slow down any questions
Okay.
or close any questions you have. So I'll stop talking and turn it over to Mike.
And I naturally am like, oh, okay, I'm okay. Is that bad for Patty if I'm, or Director Sullivan, if I'm standing here?
That's fine.
Director Sullivan?
I can hear you well.
Okay, all right. Well, nice to see everyone again. I noticed, or one of the things I changed here was a title change because we've had the same kind of nuts and bolts session a few times, and it's actually all the same board members. And so we switched it up some this time and are really just going to do some updates of some things that have developed since we last met. Typically, we've done this at the beginning of the academic year due to competing priorities and conflicts. We switched it up last year and did it a little out of sequence. We're back to August, but we'll also do things a little differently this time, which may work well with the timing that we have also. 3 areas that we'll cover. Something new is you have a policy that was enacted in February, so just wanted to share some observations that I had about that, see if it prompts any questions that are related to your new PPS policy. And then we haven't done too many case reviews, but there's quite a bit of activity at the Oregon Ethics Commission, and just seeing how cases are unfolding either in cases that result in a final order, some sort of discipline, or advice letters, just shows kind of like what are the issues coming up on the ground, and we have 3 or 4 examples there. So policy, it's great in February that the board passed its own policy for ethics and conflicts of interest, and the things that stuck out to me a lot were things that were beyond the rules, those nuts and bolts that we go through. And that's obviously pretty hard to read here, but it's in your policy. But this purpose in general, I think, I always like to hearken back to the purpose. When we've talked about when we've started with the law, it's what was the legislator's purpose? What was PPS's purpose, the board's purpose in passing this? And I won't read the whole thing, but as part of it, one of the phrases is, as responsible stewards of the district's resources and you're expected to perform business with integrity and accountability without undue or the perception of undue influence. And that perception issue, I think, is really underscores so much of, one, both the rules, but also when there's ambiguity in the rules, what is the perception going to be, and should we, if there's a close call, not every rule interpretation is going to be certain or clear, and if something's going to create a perception of a problem, then that's a focus of your policy, and obviously that's good policy. One other point on that first slide is, employees are subject to, I don't know why we lost. No, it's back, right. I don't know what. Employees, of course, are subject to discipline. Board members, there's, different consequences that arise from issues that arise here. But I did notice when I went through the Oregon Ethics Commission work that it is, it's board members and usually higher level individuals, and I think that's, there's more issues that arise, and the expectation of executive level and board level public officials is very high, and so it's not surprising that the Ethics Commission, that's where most of their time is spent. Similar, just the policy also has really good language about trust, equity, and accountability. So in that nuance, the answer often will lie here. What is the conflict of interest situation? There's not a clear answer. What's going to increase trust of the board? Our firm has a vision statement, and when we have problems that arise, that statement reflects our values, and so many of them will be in the details, and then we will step back and say, okay, but what does this really mean with respect to the values that we have? And so I just really encourage you, when you're working through the challenges here, to utilize these types of principles. They're also reflected in two similar but not exactly the same statements that you have about conflicts of interest. You have an avoiding the appearance of conflicts of interest. Board members should avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest. And then you have all board members and district employees must disqualify themselves from participating in district actions when there is a conflict of interest. And so with the should, as you're looking to even model for the rest of the district, I think there are probably opportunities where, even though a rule may not require it, you're putting the district and yourself in a good position by removing yourself from a situation. Another policy provision that caught my attention was the prohibition on retaliation. I think that's a great thing to have. I think there are probably legal principles, but it is not in the Oregon Ethics Commission Oregon Chapter 244 rules. There isn't a discussion of retaliation. Good to have it in your policy. And it's also a good time, I think, to have a reminder about what retaliation really is and how it can arise. And it's often misunderstood. Retaliation is not about whether or not the report was right or wrong. It's about what happened to the person after making the report. And so if somebody makes that report based on the best information that they have in good faith, and then they come say, and then you retaliated against me, a lot of times the response is, yeah, but the report wasn't true. I didn't violate the rule. Well, but that's not the question. If somebody is raising a concern, they need to be treated the same as if they did not raise the concern with respect to employment or other actions that can impact their standing. So, those are the policy observations. A few ethics interpretations that drive home some points that I think are worthy of consideration. This first one was a stipulated final order, and so that means this was investigated as an enforcement action, and although there was not a full hearing resulting in a decision, it's kind of like a settlement, but it gives you a good idea of the way the Ethics Commission is going to look at something, and can be a good reminder of some of the authority that they have. This was a board member who seconded a motion to adopt salary increases for 911 dispatchers, also voted to adopt the salary increase proposal. This actually happened 4 times over 4 different collective bargaining agreements that came before the board. Problem was the board member's wife was a dispatcher. And so every time this board member was voting, they were voting for their relative. The vote had the effect of creating a financial benefit for their relative. When we've done the nuts and bolts, I put up the definition of relative. It's in your policy. It's like 4 lines long. It's a lot. If you think I might be related to this person, you probably are underneath the Ethics Commission rules. So, when in doubt, make sure you check. But it's a pretty basic case. Did the board member have to recuse himself?
Yes.
Yes. Board member was required to announce the conflict and recuse himself from the discussion, the debate, or the vote. So it's a pretty straightforward application. What I thought was particularly interesting about this, though, was the potential penalties. So the commission determined that this was 4 separate violations. The violations each could result in a $5,000 fine, so $5,000 for each violation, and double the benefit as a penalty, double the benefit that was received. So if they went into a full enforcement action, then they would have taken the salary schedule, the benefit that went to the relative, and what you can see is if there's a high-profile situation or something where the ethics commission thinks somebody is a really bad actor, maybe did it with intent. We don't know all the facts here about how this happened 4 times. Nobody was catching on. How did it get raised? But in the settlement, the individual ended up paying $500. A lot of the settlements don't have any payment at all, but I thought this was a good illustration of, if things go really badly here, if you took each of those salary increases and if they increased somebody's salary a few $1,000s over each time that was implemented and you doubled that up, you're talking about pretty significant penalty that can arise.
I have a question
Yes.
related to that. Okay, I have a granddaughter-in-law who's a substitute teacher, and we are, talking about substitute teachers' pay. In general, does just having one, would that mean I shouldn't vote on our labor relations in that area?
One thing I'm always hesitant about because of something I said once in a presentation that got misinterpreted is I'd probably want to sit down and talk to you, but I would definitely look into that. I'm looking as we speak for my definition of relative because I have to see if granddaughter-in-law would fall.
Yeah, you said everybody's related.
But if it would, that would be a concern, and it probably would be. Let's see, we've got daughter-in-law, relative spouse.
Yeah, I do care about her family.
Reading in real time is always tricky, but I don't see granddaughter-in-law there. However, that's one of those, that gets us back to, would you want to think about it? Liz, do you?
I'm just saying, I'm happy to follow up, Patty, separately after this training.
To make sure, but it's also a good example of, okay, so here it is, maybe you have a close call. Is that something where you want to think about it and say, well, regardless of whether or not it's specifically precluded, what's the perception? And it may not be a concern, but something to think about, and Liz will follow up, and she'll follow up with me if she thinks that's appropriate.
Okay.
Second example that we have, this is a advice letter, so individuals can ask for written advice from either staff or the commission itself. Most of them are staff. That can help avoid a penalty if you give full information and you get advice and you follow the advice. And here was chair of the commission, or not chair, pardon me, but it was a letter about, yes, chair of the commission, about going to a Blazers game. And the snip from the letter, there was almost no other factual information in this letter, but just says, to commemorate Women's History Month, this is a pregame and in-game gathering that will bring together local leaders and Rip City leadership in celebration in recognition of achievements of Oregon women, complimentary beverages and food provided, and a moment of honor on the court at halftime to thank you for all you do for our state. So, request was, can I attend this? And I actually just put up questions for us to work through. Do you think the chair was able to attend according to Oregon Ethics Commission.
Good book.
Yes, and
I was there.
feels oddly. I thought it might feel a little familiar. So yes, the chair can attend because it was an official capacity and a ceremonial purpose. And so that's the exception to the gift rule for entertainment. And you may recall from the nuts and bolts, there's many exceptions and some seem similar, but there are some differences which we'll talk about in just a second. But it was a ceremonial role. And the next question, and maybe we already got the answer, could any board member attend? And, probably, but, is it still in a ceremonial role? And if I was a board member, I would want to make sure before I took something like this, especially something that's this high profile, that there really is going to be some sort of recognition and ceremony to it, especially if it is an entertainment-focused concert, sports event, kind of a big ticket item. Question, can you think of facts that might create more risk, maybe not make this seem permissible if we throw them in?
Maybe giving them a gift when they went?
Sure, getting something extra that's beyond what's in the invitation. That might be something that is a problem. Also,
There was no ceremonial. It was just come and drink in our suite.
Exactly. It's the fourth game, and there's nothing ceremonial about it. You've gone 4 different times. It's the same people every single time. Somebody's going to start raising an eyebrow. It looks a little different. It's the NBA Finals. Get really hypothetical about it. What's that?
So game 4 is a problem.
Yeah, game 4 is a problem.
The series.
Unless we're down 3-0.
Right.
In that case, you're giving them the gift of showing up. So these are really fact specific, and you have to know what the facts are. And the facts, as presented there, were good. You're going to be recognized. At halftime, for example. And what facts might make it worthwhile to decline, even if it's permissible? So let's say you're in talks with the Blazers about something that may come before the board that would benefit the Blazers if the board would do that. Maybe that's not an actual conflict of interest. It's actually permitted. But somebody's just going to suggest that there's some impropriety. So you can come up with things that maybe make it where, maybe the rule's going to allow it, but there's a perception issue here. There's a really interesting nuance in this one, and that is the spouse was invited, spouse permitted to attend the game, spouse not allowed to participate in free food given as part of the entertainment, because the entertainment exception allows the public official and the spouse to go for the entertainment, and then when you have a non-entertainment event, the spouse is able to get food. So that was an interesting nuance at the end of this, and kind of shows you really have to think these through all the way through. A couple more.
I would have been in trouble. My wife seen it.
This was another letter, another advisory letter, fairly recent. In fact, just a couple weeks ago. A commissioner of the Oregon Commission on Hispanic Affairs has a consulting business. The consulting business has done work with the Oregon Department of Transportation. Oregon Department of Transportation is in a collaboration project with the Commission on Hispanic Affairs. So the request for advice was, tell me what I can do here, what kind of conflicts of interest might exist. And there weren't a ton of facts provided, but the answer walks through all of this analysis that you have to go through to assess this. One, is the consulting business, the answer's pretty easy on this one, is it a business with which the commissioner is associated? Because conflict of interest arises if a business with which you are associated is potentially having a gain or avoiding a financial detriment. So again, it's a pretty broad definition. Any private business, closely held corporation in which owner, officer, director, employee, or agent that the person or the person's relative owns or has owned stock. So it's a long definition. You can always go back to the definitions, but if you sense, hey, this is a group that I work with, there's something that may touch on board business, the radar should go up. Is there potentially a conflict of interest? I thought the examples here were pretty good. Potentially, yes, there's a conflict of interest. So, one issue might be coming before the commission is to expand the relationship in general with ODOT. We're going to further our cooperative efforts. Consulting business may or may not end up being able to benefit from that. It's not something that maybe it's directly involved in at that point, but that consulting business is going to go pitch to get involved in the expanded program. So maybe there's a potential that that's going to create a conflict of interest. So that would be announced, but the individual could participate should they choose to. They could also choose to recuse themselves if they were concerned. Same thing if the recommendation from the board is, hey, let's do less work with ODOT. We need to scale back what we're doing. Oh, well, now consulting business maybe is going to get less work from that relationship. So announcing that potential conflict of interest would be required. One more, and this was a bit abbreviated because of the mandatory training, and so we're on a pretty good track. And just one executive session stipulated final order that I think just serves as a reminder that these issues come up a lot to the commission. Probably the most common issue is executive sessions that don't stay in their lane, and this was an example of that. 4 executive sessions in one day, so that's a long day. 3 were noticed. 1 was announced during an executive session. Didn't stand by the rules. The rules for what you can have an executive session for are pretty narrow, specific, descriptive. And so there was the executive session to discuss the evaluation of the chief executive. Started talking about pay and benefits. Exceeded the scope of the executive session. Discussed an ethics complaint about a former employee in an employment discipline executive session. So beyond the scope. The results, again, OEC has authority to fine $1,000 per violation. So, here again, the ones that tend to get this far, maybe you have a few violations. I read OEC's determination about 20 times. This was one violation with 2 equivalent actions, which I really don't quite grasp, but what you can grasp is that they can start looking at every time something goes wrong, you should assume that they, in an executive session, that they may say that is a particular violation, specific violation. And as we saw with Newberg case, that had a lot of publicity around it. These also can unfold in court, so they are not confined to the Oregon Ethics Commission for enforcement. So the sort of the change in approach and the truncated timing worked out pretty well because I'm happy to take any questions. In wrap up, wanted to just mention what Liz mentioned already, and that is there is going to be a required training that was added to the law focusing on public meetings and executive sessions Once more information is out about that, I'm sure you'll be informed, but it is, according to the website, in the works. There's a pretty good training site for a lot of different trainings that they're starting to do at the Oregon Ethics Commission that are on some very specific topics. There is the guide for public officials that's hyperlinked through your materials. So if you're ever looking for a reference beyond your policy or beyond the general counsel's office, that's a good place to refer to. And the Attorney General Public Records and Meetings Manual is very well organized. It is a 2019 edition, and that was quite some time ago. And so I would always want to make sure that whatever if you ever use that as a resource, you would want to confirm that whatever you're reading is current. Most of it is. So, any questions, final observations, or comments?
I know the Ethics Commission has had some challenges sometimes getting back to people promptly. Are they, like, if you have ethics questions along these lines, are they able to get back in a reasonable amount of time, or do you need to build in like a month, for them to?
I would build in a month. Yeah,
so
I think
if something comes up next week, you're not going to get a whole lot of guidance.
Yeah, and I can't remember. I think it's the commission letter is a 60 day. They'll tell you whether they'll answer or not, and then the staff is 30 days. But I'm sure that gets backlogged and probably has to get a little bit. But yes, if you are wanting to get an advice letter, it's something that you've got to be thinking quite a bit ahead about.
But it is just a little challenging because our own council doesn't provide advice to individual board members, because again, it's our individual responsibility, not a district sort of thing. So I'm not asking you a question, I'm more stating the record. It's challenging if the Ethics Commission takes a month and our own council, who's very helpful, I want to be clear about pointing us where to go, but also very careful to say, I can't advise you on your ethics, obligations. It does leave us a little bit in the lurch.
So that's an excellent point to raise, is that when talking through ethics questions with board members, and when I do it in real time, I always say, all I'm doing is representing the entity right now. Obviously, for the entity, it's best for us not to have people who have ethics violations, but this is your own issue. There was many years ago, somebody asked a question in a session of the then commissioner. This was in the early 2000s, and it was, if you ask the question and the answer to a lawyer that's publicly paid, I'm going to screw it up, but basically if the answer was yes, it might be an ethics violation, there was an ethics violation to ask the question in the first place. That was really squirrely, and that I think that interpretation left with the individual who left that office.
Another quick question: has the Ethics Commission weighed in on? I mean, it's really clear when there's a financial, when there's a direct financial benefit, like we gave the example of the person's spouse and voting for a pay raise. Have they given guidance on how clear that financial benefit has to be? Because I could imagine, I'm just trying to think of. I'll even use mine tonight. I don't think there was a real conflict of interest, but if the appearance feels like I shouldn't vote for a contract, with my employer, and I'm just, theoretically in the long run, if Metro did really, really well, I might be compensated more. If Metro went out of business, I would obviously be compensated less. But that's really distant from a particular contract. Have they weighed in on how close does the financial benefit have to be to the action that the woman took?
So I suspect somewhere in their many letters and decisions that there's something that tries to parse that out, but there's not a good, clear line. I appreciate that you did that tonight and thought maybe it was just a way to introduce the topic.
I was just trying to tee you up.
Yeah, thank you. That's
Andrew, always thinking ahead.
And I was thinking right along the lines that you were, where is that line drawn? It's not perfect. It's not perfectly clear, and I would go try and find the 5 or 6 most pertinent opinions on that to see if we could narrow it down a little.
Just
I guess one thing I'd say, I found generally they're pretty responsive, which was kind of surprising. Like you can send them an email, you can have a conversation and then send them an email and they'll confirm it.
That has not been my experience, but
Yeah, I mean,
maybe you get better treatment.
They just don't like
I asked
you.
politely. I mean, but generally they answer the phone, and unless it's a really complicated or gray area, I find they're generally helpful.
And are they suggesting or indicating that they are treating that as a staff opinion under the statute?
Well, like for example, there was something a couple times. There's been things related to the like annual filings,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like, really? And so I was like, I'm going to send you an email, and can you send me something back just to confirm it? And I figured,
That should help. Yeah.
I mean, it's not a staff opinion like formally requesting one, but it seems like something in writing from.
Right, because at the end of the day, if the commission somehow decided that that was wrong, the fact that you were given wrong information would certainly bear on how they're going to assess it. So.
Assess it or the mitigation? I'm thinking about the
Mitigation.
state bar.
Oh,
I know
yeah.
if the state bar gives ethics advice, they can come after you. Anyway.
Yes, they can come after you anyway. And if it is not confirmed that it's under the statute, it's certainly not guaranteed that they could.
It mitigates the
completely-
penalty. It
yeah.
may not mitigate the analysis. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I think they're very helpful.
Yeah.
I think it's very unlikely.
I mean, the alternative is getting your own lawyer and everything.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not trying to talk you out of it. I should say quietly.
Don't go to jail. Do everything not to go to jail.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you
Mike.
all. Nice to see
Thank you, Mike.
everyone.
Adjourns the
Move on to your
training
next.
session?
Yeah. Do I have to adjourn it?
I don't know.
Okay. This training session is adjourned. Thank you.
I think we're headed then to